Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about a bombshell report from NFL insider Dianna Russini, and from that report, who are the Raiders quarterback options for this upcoming season? Because when you look at the report, a lot of rumors around Geno Smith, because apparently the Raiders are looking to trade for a potential starting quarterback. Then, at the very end of today's show, I'm going to give you the salary cap news. What is the Raiders' salary cap looking like as it stands right now? If you don't already know, we're going to be live every single day next week, Monday through Friday. If you want to hang out with Jeremy Chugs and I, the Chat Sports team, we are going to be bumping out a lot of live content. Quite frankly, 30-plus hours. It's going to be wild. So here was the story that broke early this morning from Dianna Russini, and I would look at this multiple different ways. The Las Vegas Raiders are exploring veteran quarterback options. That is something that we know. And we knew that the Raiders were going to go out and they were going to look at every single free agent option possible. On top of that, though, they're looking at the trade market, which, again, we knew was going to end up happening simply because when you go out and you try to trade for a guy like Matthew Stafford, that tells me that you're going to look at all options if it means a trade, if that means that you're getting a better option overall. But what I also think is this. It absolutely confirms the show that I did back on February 15th, which simply said the Las Vegas Raiders will sign or trade for a quarterback no matter what this offseason, and they are going to do it very early in the process. Quite frankly, they're going to do it by Wednesday next week. You're going to know who the Raiders starting QB is going to be. And if you want to see my report break down a little bit more in depth from a few weeks ago, here is the thumbnail. This video is also going to be available to y'all down in the comments, down in the description of today's show. If you just want to see a little bit more in depth of some of the things Dianna said today, is a lot of the stuff that I kind of said about 2 weeks ago in that video right there. So when you talk about the Raiders quarterback options, you got to talk about three different categories as it stands right now. You are going to look at the quarterbacks in NFL free agency. There is a quarterback in, I'm going to call it NFL purgatory right now, and then also some potential trade targets, because if that report from Dianna is true, which it is, obviously, they are looking at some potential starting quarterbacks on the trade market. First off, though, let's talk about the realistic and the options in free agency. First one is Sam Darnold, who I think a lot of people would consider is the top free agent quarterback on the market right now. We're going to know that Chip Kelly wants somebody that can sling the rock. Last season, he had 35 touchdowns in 2024. Absolutely a career year. But Darnold also has been linked to the Raiders so many times this offseason, where the moment quarterback conversation started, the one person that I think has always been in connection to the silver and black has been Sam Darnold here. In terms of what's the connection, Spytek and Carroll, they have already shown that they can help journeyman quarterbacks, which I know is what Darnold has been. A spread offense that runs the rock, I have said before, I think is the perfect fit for somebody like Sam Darnold, and a great bridge option. The Raiders, no matter what, are probably still going to draft a quarterback. It might not be as early as what some people think, but the Raiders' plan is to sign or trade for a quarterback and then let a QB in the draft learn from a year or two. That has been the option. That has been the plan since this whole offseason has started. Let's go to another quarterback, though, that could potentially be on the Silver and Black's radar. It was reported by ESPN's Adam Schefter that the Raiders were interested in Justin Fields. This was last week on February 28th. And even though Fields is going to cost a lot, when you listen to the way Pete Carroll and Spytek talk about the way that they envision building this football team, they envision building the entire team, which is going to help your quarterback out. There's no starting quarterback at a cheaper price that helps you do that John Spytek, Pete Carroll plan, I think, better than Fields, who went 4-2 last season with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Steelers' defense was much better in games that Fields was out there. I'll also say I know how scared Fields makes people, because I'll admit he's not a great thrower of the football. But to me, if there is one offensive coordinator in the NFL, maybe on the planet, that could save him, I think that it's Chip Kelly. And even though the Raiders did move on from Champ Kelly, the old Raiders assistant GM, who was a part of the regime that drafted Fields, which I'll admit I do think took the chances of Fields coming to the Raiders down a little bit. But if the Raiders want to be a legit run-first team, Justin Fields is a name to keep in mind. Let's go to another option here, though. There have been a lot of reports from Jay Glazer. There's been also some other reports out there that Russell Wilson is unlikely to join the Raiders. But he has started 199 career games. He played last season at $1.2 million in 2024, which is not going to happen again this year. You're probably going to be looking at $25 million north is where Wilson's going to be going. But the reason why there's a connection and the reason why we're even talking about it still, like, if Russell Wilson didn't play for 10 years with Pete Carroll and won a Super Bowl, if we got reports out there that said Russell Wilson is unlikely to join the Raiders, most of the time we would just stop talking about it. But because of that Pete Carroll connection, I do wonder if Sam Darnold goes back to Minnesota, if Justin Fields goes back to Pittsburgh, what could the Raiders do? Maybe they look at somebody like Russell Wilson. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to drop a name. If the Raiders sign a quarterback in free agency, who is it going to be? Because the three names that I mentioned are the only three names the Raiders would consider in terms of a starting option. That's the key word. This is going to be the pinned comment on today's show. Scroll on down. My answer coming up here in just a moment. I'm going to say Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold has been the quarterback I have felt all offseason is the most likely to be under center. I put out a video about a month ago illustrating the top free agent QBs for Chip Kelly, and in that video also was Sam Darnold. When you look at all the smoke that has been around Darnold, and I know there's a lot of people out there like, Mitch, you got to stop saying where there's smoke, there's fire. I say it, though, because when you see the amount of reports, the amount of connections around one person and around one team, you got to keep an eye out for it. Now, I am also going to bring up here two other free agent quarterbacks that I know are at least on the Raiders' radar. Now, these two are not starting caliber QBs. Marcus Mariota was recruited by Chip Kelly, went to Oregon, played 1 year with Kelly at Oregon back in 2012, and to me, Pete has already said that he wants to add quarterback competition. Aiden O'Connell's been working with Tom Brady. He's been putting on a little bit of weight. Mariota would be good competition for AOC to see who could get that QB2 job if they still also want to draft a QB and let that QB sit and learn and have no risk whatsoever of putting them in the game. Another quarterback option you can look at in the free agent market is Zach Wilson, and according to Vincent Bonsignor, it is not a rumor. They are pursuing Wilson. He was the former number 2 overall pick from the New York Jets back in 2021, and obviously he's bounced around a little bit. But just like I said about Mariota, Wilson at only 25 years old would at least be a quarterback battle with Aiden O'Connell. Now, let's talk about the quarterback that technically at the time I'm making this show, you'd have to trade for him. But when NFL free agency officially gets underway, you're going to be able to sign him. And the quarterback that I would say is in purgatory right now is Aaron Rodgers. And I say that because the Jets have already announced that he is going to be a post-June 1st cut. So technically, if you wanted them now, you'd have to trade for him. The Jets aren't going to trade Rodgers because of the extra money that they would have to eat right now. They would have to eat all of that $49 million. By structuring him as a post-June 1st cut, they only have to eat $14 million this year, and then they're going to have to eat $35 next year. But for a lot of NFL teams, they're more okay to do that because in their mind, the salary cap is going to go up again, so it's a little bit less money than it is right now. But at 41 years old, we know that Father Time is undefeated. But if I am also the Raiders, I know that I was able to bring in Tom Brady as my owner, but Tom Brady was also able to win a Super Bowl when he was basically Aaron Rodgers' age with John Spytek. Now, there was a report that came out earlier in the week that said that the Raiders don't know if they're interested in Rodgers because they're unsure how well he fits Chip Kelly's system. But Max Crosby said that that's a quarterback that I would like to see in Vegas, and then the Raiders just went out and made Max Crosby the highest paid player in the NFL, not at the quarterback position. If they were really uncomfortable with Crosby's words, I don't know if they would have paid him the amount of money that they just paid him. Now let's go to the next players here, the trade targets, which this is where a lot of the conversation is kind of going from that Dianna Russini report because, I think what people expect the Raiders to look at free agency. I don't really think people expected the Raiders to look at trade options, especially in that key word in Diana's report is potential starting quarterback. That means it is a starting quarterback on an NFL team that the Raiders are trying to call for. I'm going to give you the names on who I potentially think it is here in a moment. Before I do, though, we always use a term here at Chat Sports. It's called a real one. And we kind of developed this term because people used to always say Raider Nation for life. A real one here at Chat Sports is somebody that I know you got my back, right? I know 93 Nabman has got my back. I know Taino Raider has got my back. I know David Zahn, Raider Ron, got my back. Brandon Jasper was a real one. If you're a real one and you want to get one of our shirts, go to chatsports.com/RO4L. They come in a bunch of different sizes, 2 different options as well. This one I actually love a lot. The logo is our Just Win Baby, which also was designed by a Raiders Report watcher. If you love this show and you appreciate what we do, if I ever see somebody walking around with a Raiders Report shirt, I don't care what city it's in. What do you say? Free beer. Yeah, I was going to say, we're going to get a pick. I was going to put it on the show. Chugs is like, even if you're under 21. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, like, real talk, we would appreciate it if you also rocked our gear. Chatsports.com/RO4L. Those links are down in the comments and in the description of today's show. Let's now talk about the quarterbacks that the Raiders could trade for. And this one is the least likely out of them all. But if the Vikings do end up sticking with Sam Darnold, J.J. McCarthy might become available. I don't think that this is really all that likely. Minnesota drafted McCarthy 10 overall in the 2024 NFL Draft, and I think if the Raiders wanted to make this deal, it would cost them 6, which maybe if you're the Vikings, you go, all right, we're going to pay Sam Darnold, who we just won 14 games with. Now we get pick number 6. We also still keep our current first-round pick, and you're going to build around that team. That's an option. Tom Brady, I know for a fact, is a big fan of McCarthy, the Michigan ties there, but it's also the way that McCarthy, I think, runs an offense, and TB12 likes that overall. I do think that he is a project in Chip Kelly's system, but again, for the Raiders this offseason, no matter what you do, comes with risk. Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, all come with risk. Aaron Rodgers, all comes with risk. The one person that comes with risk that is also guaranteed to be the cheapest and youngest, J.J. McCarthy. I know you got to give up pick 6. I get that loud and clear. But would you rather give up pick 6 for McCarthy, or would you rather go pay Sam Darnold potentially $30, $35 million a year? In all honesty, and this doesn't even come from me, who I'm not even that big fan of J.J. McCarthy, but it's because I trust Chip Kelly. Let's talk about another option here. It's Kirk Cousins, and this one is going to open up some eyes, but this has been a name that I've thrown out a few times on this show before, and it's a little bit weird because it was reported earlier in the offseason that Atlanta could release Cousins and eat $65 million. Then, at the NFL Combine, the Falcons were saying, no, we're going to keep Kirk, we're going to keep Michael Penix. We'll see how well that happens. He did have a career-high 16 interceptions last season. He has started 159 career games. And in the Dianna report, Kirk is a name that is being talked about because the Raiders are doing their homework, and the Raiders are smart to do their homework. Now, do I think Cousins is going to come to Las Vegas? No, not really. I think if you're going to make this deal happen, it's going to be Atlanta cutting him, and then you look to sign him. I will say this, though. Cousins does use play action, and Pete Carroll loves to run the football, but if Cousins can't move, because what I saw last year in that Achilles injury, it did not look good. But when you think about what Max Crosby said about Aaron Rodgers, he talked about year 1 after an Achilles and how difficult it is to kind of get it going. Well, if he has that same thought process about Rodgers, maybe he has the exact same thought process around Kirk Cousins. The biggest question mark with Cousins, does he want to be a mentor in Atlanta? Because according to reports, when the Falcons drafted Penix, Cousins was pissed. Let's go to the name, though, that everybody is thinking about and all of the rumors are pointing to from that Dianna Russini report. It is around Geno Smith. And Smith could be traded this offseason because he has $0 million guaranteed on his contract and no years after 2025. If the Seattle Seahawks end up trading him, they save $31 million, which, again, this is another name that I kind of anticipated the Seahawks would move on from. DK Metcalf asked to be traded. Tyler Lockett was just released. If I'm Geno Smith and I'm going, wait, I got $0 million guaranteed and you're doing this to all of my receivers, I'm going to lose all my guys. I'm going to go up to Seattle and I'm going to go, I want a new paycheck. I want a brand new deal. And if you're unwilling to do that, then I would like to be out of the door. And Pete Carroll, the Raiders, they know that. They've picked up the phone. They've called the Seahawks. But if the Raiders were to make this trade, they would only owe Geno $14.8 million in 2025. I'll admit you'd probably have to give him a new deal if you made the trade. So maybe you're uncomfortable with that. But then maybe if you're Geno, you take that $15 million, you see what you got, and if you can go out there and you can prove it, well, then maybe you get a bigger deal next season with an organization that's proved that they've been able to do a lot with journeyman quarterbacks and somebody that's already helped you become a starting quarterback again, like Pete Carroll. 4 seasons with Pete, and even though Geno, I do think is a solid bridge, the comp that I have thrown out there, which I was probably saying this a few months ago, a Shedeur Sanders comp to me, I think Shedeur is very similar to Geno Smith, which maybe is an unpopular opinion for some, but I think it's pretty accurate. If the Raiders were serious about Shedeur Sanders and they wanted him to learn for a year or two, I do think trading for Geno Smith would be an intriguing option because I do think that that skill set is very similar. But Geno Smith, Chip Kelly, I still feel like we're just hitting a single when, I'm sorry, I want to go for a home run this offseason. So here you go. You get to be John Spytek. If the Raiders trade for a quarterback, who would it be? We talked about We talked about Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, and J.J. McCarthy. Again, I'm kind of putting Aaron Rodgers in the free agency tab. He's not really somebody in there. There is one name, though, that is being thrown out that is never going to happen. Never going to happen. But coming up here after this YouTube ad break, I'm going to tell you who I think is the most logical, most realistic option to be traded for. I know you see a picture of Kirk Cousins there. That's more of don't sleep on the idea of bringing in Cousins. But Geno Smith is the one that I think is the most logical. It is the one that I believe is the most likely to happen. The person that the Raiders aren't going to trade for, and as soon as I saw the report go out, I rolled my eyes a little bit. I had Trace, who covers the Saints here. He's sending me all sorts of stuff. Derek Carr to Las Vegas is not going to happen, y'all. Now, I know that DC is about to make $30 million by March 15th, and if traded, the Saints got to make a decision on what they're going to do with Carr before that date because he's going to get $30 million in his bank account by that day. It sounds like that they're expected to just get ready to move forward with DC, but it's because they don't really have another option. He said that he didn't want to restructure his contract. He wants to make the money that he wants. The Saints, though, they eat $40 million by trading Carr. So if they were to trade him, they would want something in return if they're going to eat all that money. Carr would be a $30 million cap hit for the Raiders, so if you make the trade, you got to pay him $30 million this season, and then it is a $61.5 million cap hit next year, which obviously would never happen. The $0 million guaranteed. Essentially, you're looking at Derek Carr and a 1-year prove-it deal for $30 million is how I would look at it. You'd probably also have to give up a 4th or a 5th round pick, though maybe a 5th round pick in order to do it. When it comes to Carr, though, why it's not going to happen is because I'm sitting up here saying, even if the Saints looked at me and said, you can have Derek Carr for a 7th round pick in 2026, I'm not making the trade because I'm not interested. I'm not interested in giving up a minimal draft pick to go pay a below-average quarterback $30 million when, if I wanted to pay a QB $30 million, I would rather you pay Aaron Rodgers. I would rather you pay Sam Darnold, who are both better options than DC right now. So the fact that there's better free agent options and the fact that also DC is, again, never won anything, I have the utmost respect for Carr, but Raider fans need to move on from number 4. Doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't help you win. Doesn't help you win. If you want to go win 7 to 8 games, go get yourself Derek Carr. I got a lot bigger aspirations for that. So overall, the Raiders, where it stands right now at the time that I'm making this video, they got $80.8 million in salary cap space after Max Crosby's cap hit went up to 38.4, which I'm not going to lie, was shocked the way that they structured it. Though, if the Raiders are winning football games come 2027, we're going to go back and look at that Crosby deal and say it's one of the best contracts in the NFL. And then Alex Cappa, his cap hit this season is $5 million, so $80.8 million to spend. This offseason is going to be wild, and the Raiders will be bringing in one of the quarterbacks that I mentioned on today's show.